So, Brandon, welcome to the Crypto Princess channel. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
All good, all good. So, Brandon, before we get into your crypto story, I'd like to know if I was to meet you in high school, what kind
Oh,
of person were you?
yeah, that's a great question. High school Brandon. Well, so I was an athlete. I ended up running Division 1 track in college. So for those of you guys who don't know, that's not to toot my own horn, but that's like the highest level of track and cross country in college in the United States. So good athlete, very studious. I was going to be an engineer and get engineering degrees in college. So pretty good student, pretty good athlete. Kind of fit into a bunch of different groups, but not directly into one. So I had a lot of friends. And yeah, was just always kind of, like a little bit of a funny kid, I guess, and a pretty outgoing and still kind of growing into my own skin, I think, at that time in high school for sure.
And after high school, you went off to university. What were you studying at university?
Yep. So then after high school, I went to the University of Memphis, go Tigers, went and ran track there and studied biomedical engineering.
Okay, awesome. Um, And from my understanding, you got into crypto around about 2016. So 2016, for those people who are unaware, is very, very early. Bitcoin was only 7 years old, and Ethereum was only about a year old. It was very early. It was a halving year. I think Bitcoin started off, or the low of 2016 was something like 400 US dollars. It made a high of 1,000 US dollars. And then the next year, 2017, which we'll talk about, was the parabolic bull run. Tell me, how did you first discover Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I was in graduate school at that time at Texas A&M. I was studying mechanical engineering. So I knew at that point, I was going to start making money in the next couple of years, and I needed to figure out what to do with it. So I was listening to a lot of personal finance podcasts. Two of them, one were like they were completely uncorrelated. One was Preston Pitch's We Study Billionaires. So it was a great show. That was before he had a Bitcoin only podcast. And then one was, I believe it was called Millennial Money. I'm not sure if they still do it or not. But she had a crypto guy who got on there and became like an Ethereum millionaire. So I went in
Mhm.
and I got his book and, started listening to Preston a lot. And, I started trading Bitcoin and Dogecoin on Robinhood. I didn't have a lot of money. I was in graduate school. So I was using that, $100 that I would get from Uber to, maybe trade a little bit of it and get some extra beer money so I could go out to the bars with my friends. But then, something about Bitcoin always really stuck with me, and I wanted to learn a lot more about that. At that time, like I said, Dogecoin was still kind of coming around, and Robinhood was still at the point where you couldn't pull any of your crypto off of the platform, and so I just started really looking into it at that time because of the I guess because of the the appeal, the allure. It wasn't really at first, I got into it for maybe the get rich quick kind of thing, but
Mhm.
at a certain perspective, after learning about it and not having a lot of money to just dump and play around with it at that time, I really got educated on the true Bitcoin ethos and how hard money can really change the world. And so from then on in, once I got my first big boy job and really started buying December 2018, that's when I was, already all in at that point. So very lucky that I, found it, stumbled upon it with a bunch of different podcasts. But, it wasn't the first time I heard about Bitcoin. I always tell this story that I remember back in 2012. I don't know if the listeners or if you remember the year or the day, December 12th, 20 or December 21st, 2012. So it was like 12/1 or 2/1, 2012. That was the year in the Mayan calendar that the world was going to end. And
Oh
coincidentally,
gosh, yes.
Yeah, coincidentally, it was one of my buddy's birthday, so that's how I always remember that. And he was at the University of Texas, which is very big into the Bitcoin and crypto scene right now. And back then, they were even very forward on that. So he was at the business school, and I always remember him telling me this, like, yeah, dude, hey, this Bitcoin thing, it's going to be the future. You should really look into it. I'm like, really, man? He's like, yeah. And then nothing happened. We went and gotten drunk and, acted like the world was going to end the next day. So there was definitely a few other times where I remember Bitcoin being brought up to me, but didn't really pull the trigger until I was in graduate school and kind of hearing about it a couple more times after that. But glad I did. And yeah, it's changed my life to say the very least.
2012 was exceptionally early into Bitcoin. Your friend knew about Bitcoin at 2012. That was even before Bitcoin's first bull run, which was in 2013. Can I just ask what happened to him?
He never bought Bitcoin. Still to this day, has not bought Bitcoin. He was told then. He told me, "Hey,
Oh,
this
no.
Bitcoin thing is really cool." And then I saw him like a couple years ago, bro. Like, hey, I'm starting this whole thing all around Bitcoin. Like, I always remember that conversation. I bring it up to him. I always remember you telling me about that. Did you ever buy it? He's like, nah, man, like I'm gonna wait for a dip. I'm gonna wait for a dip. I saw
Mm.
him maybe 6, 7 months ago. I'm like, brother, are you buying Bitcoin yet? What's going on? He's like, nah, man, I don't know. Like, I'm still just kind of, and he's still working the same job he had out of college. So
Mm.
sometimes, you could lead a
Mm.
horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? So unfortunately for him, I haven't convinced him, even though he was kind of part of the reason that convinced me. So it's a little backwards here, but unfortunately has not bought any Bitcoin just yet.
Okay, awesome. Okay, let's go back to 2016. So when you decided to look into Bitcoin yourself, what did your family and friends think?
Yeah, so I didn't tell any of them really because I wasn't really, going into it with a lot of money. The one time that people really started to worry and I guess freak out on me was when in 2020 when we had that big
Hmm.
dip because I had that big boy job. I was buying it a little bit every paycheck, through late 2018 through 2019. And then we had the cerveza sickness is what I like to call it, right? The big dip where everything dipped below $4,000. And at that point in time, I realized like, hey, you know what? I am, I think I was like 24 at the time or 26 or something like that, like 25, 24, 26. And I was like, all right, you know what? I have a lot of time to potentially earn this back if, this whole thing crashes and I'm absolutely wrong. I don't think I am. So you know what? Let's just double down. So I started doubling and putting more and more money from each paycheck into Bitcoin during that time. Thank God I did. But I mean, at that time, I had a girlfriend at the time, and she, when I told her, she came to me absolutely bawling, thinking I was just being reckless with the money, like ruining our
Hmm.
future and everything else. Needless to say, it didn't end up working out, but I'm glad that I didn't let anybody else influence me on that perspective because, my parents, same kind of thing. They were a little bit worried, like I was being reckless with my money. And, you know, then I kind of got them into Bitcoin. And, unfortunately, they got caught up in one of these exchange collapses. Luckily, they weren't, all in on it just yet. But it's been kind of a wild ride to try to get my friends and family in. And at this point, I just kind of letting them come to me. I'm not necessarily, going in and telling them, hey, you should buy this, you should buy that. I'm just kind of letting them come to me at this point now.
Hmm. Because if we tell them, they don't listen anyway. I have the same issue with my family and friends. Okay, so that was 2016. You started to research Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. You were following somebody who became an ETH Maxi. You didn't really tell anyone. I suppose you obviously didn't have much support apart from the podcast that you were watching. In 2016, going back to 2016, because I know you're a bit of a Bitcoin maxi, you were following somebody who got rich off ETH. Um, ETH was launched with ETH. I think the white paper, Vitalik Buterin had the white paper out in 2013. 2014, they had the ICO. 2015, it launched. 2016, it was still very, very low. People had already made a lot of money on it, but obviously it was still very, very low. Back then, were you a Bitcoin Maxi or were you buying ETH and other coins?
Yeah, so at that time I was just buying Bitcoin and trading Dogecoin. I did some research on some articles, and I remember reading that hey, like Dogecoin's going to go up to the moon, and that was kind of
Mhm.
the narrative, and nobody could really explain why. And I even bought a book, like I said, from a guy who made it rich off of ETH, and he couldn't really explain why in the book. He just kind of like told his whole life story, and then said he kind of stumbled upon ETH. So I tried to dive into a little bit more of these, crypto tokens, and it seemed like majority of people in the altcoin space would try to say, hey, something about this blockchain is revolutionary and all these different aspects of it. But, as an engineer, I knew that blockchain technology is very useful, but it's not super efficient. So, when it comes to a lot of things on the blockchain, it's a lot of just like kind of buzzwords, so to speak, right? So there doesn't need to be every little thing on a blockchain in order for the world to be the most efficient, right? So I thought that the number one answer for everything is that you need to fix the money. And that's kind of, what I came to the conclusion of just doing the research between all of it. And the best solution, still to this day, it seems like it's Bitcoin, just from the peer-to-peer transaction aspect of it, the decentralization and all of that. And I kind of realized the more I did some of this research on all of these different crypto tokens, it seemed like a lot of them were just decentralized in name only. And a lot of them had all these giant marketing departments, so they're going to use all these
Mhm.
different terms and things like that. So I was very skeptical. I would not say I'm like one person that's super risk averse, so to speak. But I kind of realized like very quickly, like, hey, especially with the GameStop craze and everything like that, that maybe the traditional investment thesis that everybody broke down, whether it's stocks or whatever, like that is just there's a lot of inflation and kind of I guess the underlying monetary system is just propping up a lot of these assets, and there's really no explanation why. And the only one that I could kind of really, dig my heels into was simple supply and demand economics. I mean, it's a tale old as time. Bitcoin's the only one that truly has that fixed 21 million supply, and the demand for it continues to go up. Whether it's through, mining on the network, utilizing excess energy, or just the payments aspect, all of these different things, it seems like around the globe everybody just started to want to get into Bitcoin. Of course, like that has changed a lot drastically within the past 12 months, and it's even more than back then. I mean, it seems like the growth is exponential at this point. So basically a long-winded way of saying like, yeah, I did dabble into it a little bit, but like I said, I didn't have too much money, so I didn't have and hold on to any of the altcoins. I just kind of realized like, hey, you know what? From this is like a learning lesson. I didn't lose my shirt with any of these altcoins, but I was able to get in and go Bitcoin only from a very early on stage. And I have Preston and a lot of these other podcasters to thank for that.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, so that was 2026. Sorry, 2016. Let's talk about 2017 now. So I do understand you didn't have a lot of money, but 2017 must have been a game changer for you because it was the second bull run in Bitcoin's history. Prices started off from somewhere around 1,000 US dollars. We ended with an all-time high in the December of 2017, sorry, at just under 20,000 US dollars. It was your first bull run. We'll talk about 2018 in a minute. You watched all of that without having a lot of money because I think you were traveling as well. You were going all over the world as an athlete. Tell me about your experience of Bitcoin's second bull run.
Yeah, so in 2017, I wasn't an athlete anymore. So how it works in university is from 2012 to 2016, while I was an undergraduate, I was going all over the United States and
Mhm.
traveling, running at all of these different colleges. When I was in graduate school, I was retired, a
Oh
retired
gosh.
athlete like that. Yeah. So my little sister was still running in college. So I was going around the state of Texas and watching her when I could. But during that bull run, it was different to say the very least. I was in engineering, so and in academia. And in academia, a lot of people just want you to stay in academia. They're not really looking for you to go off, be an entrepreneur. That's kind of more of a taboo topic. Money is
Mhm.
more as a nice to have, whereas you're kind of trying to do research for the betterment of the world. And not to sound super money hungry or anything, but I never really looked at the world in that aspect. I always looked at money as a tool, right? My dad was an entrepreneur, so he was at all of my, track meets and baseball games and everything like that growing up. So I always thought that that was a path for me going forward. So I was kind of in this weird place in my life where, I was doing research on athletics. My thesis was on quarterback throwing mechanics, and for those of you guys who don't know, that's like the throwing position in American football. So of course, I could only do that type of thesis in a mechanical engineering degree in the United States. But regardless, I was doing all of that, and it was fun, but I realized like, hey, you know what? Like, I don't know if this is really going to
Mhm.
unlock, what kind of life I want to live. I knew that engineering was very safe. It has a well-paying job. There's nothing wrong with engineering or anything by any means. But I also realized like, hey, I see a lot of people in these engineering fields work 30, 40 years at the same job. They don't really necessarily grow and get to CEOs or anything like that. And they go through a lot of schooling, all of these different things that everybody here listening in the audience probably is aware of now. And so, I saw the number go up, and on Bitcoin, I'm like, this is appealing. What is this? Let's dive into it more. And then I had friends that were interning at companies like Apple and other things like that. And they had coworkers who were retiring from Bitcoin at that time in 2017. So because they were doing all that, I'm like, all right, well, hey, if this guy is retiring on Bitcoin at such a young age,
Mhm.
in 2016, 17 time, and I heard about it already in 2012, like this means I'm on to something, right? So this is another touch point. This is where I really need to start doubling and tripling down on this and really kind of digging my heels in. And the best, orange pillar, so to speak, is the number go up. Like you could tell anybody in the world, about the freedom technology, all of these different aspects, but there's always going to be some sort of skepticism. When you line it up like, hey, best performing asset last 15, 16 years, nothing quite compares to it. And you just have somebody experience it. That's what's really going to orange pill them. I actually had a buddy here last year. I had a receipt from him texting me when Bitcoin was at like 60,000, literally around this time last year. And I told him, like, at the beginning of the year, hey, Bitcoin's going to hit 100,000 by the end of the year. Bitcoin's going to hit 100,000. He sent me a screenshot of Bitcoin at 60K. Is like, yeah, buddy, Bitcoin's going to hit 100K. Then when it did, he finally bought Bitcoin. And then, of course, it crashed underneath.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then now he's finally up. But, for a while there, he was like, all right. But I think I finally convinced him and got him over to the edge. So basically, a long-winded way of saying, like, the greatest orange pillar is that number go up, and that will continue to go up forever.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, awesome. So that was 2017, the bull run, amazing bull run. Actually, it's my favorite bull run. 2018 was a bear market. Um, Two questions. The first is, were you aware of the difference between a bull market and a bear market? And what was your experience of the bear market? Because this is when you started to actually invest, wasn't it, in 2018?
Yep, December 2018 is when I got my first big boy job, and that's when everything kind of hit me. I had like a payment stipend. I was moving from Texas to Florida. So it's like 16, 17, 18-hour drive. And they gave me a payment stipend. They told me it was, I think it was, I don't know, like $3,000 or something like that. Kind of a common thing in the United States to get people to move from one place to another. I planned out for everything to be $3,000 at that point. And granted, I didn't know that the government was going to take taxes out of it. So it turned out to
Oh.
be like, 24 or 2,200 or something like that. So I was short some money right away. So this was kind of my first exposure to the whole real world scenario of everything. So I realized, all right, I need to try to invest, and like this was just kind of more assurance to me that I needed to really invest my money. And so, long story short, I didn't really know the difference between a bear and a bull market at that time. Like, I kind of just, I saw the price going up, and then I saw it down. I'm like, oh, this is a little bit cheaper now. Didn't really know like how bad the bears get because I didn't
Hmm.
have, too much money in it at that time. And so I started buying, and it was just like, hey, this is cool. This is a whole nice thing to buy, and yeah, it kind of just took me a while to get to that place. But, once I started to figure it out, it really became easy. And, it was something that I didn't really have to think about too much. At that time, I was still buying some other stocks as well. Like I wasn't just all in on Bitcoin like I am today. But it was a good time to definitely learn. And they always say the bear markets are for building. And that was kind of helping me build my own personal thesis going forward.
Hmm. Hmm. But there was a lot of people and a lot of in the press. The press was shouting, "Oh, Bitcoin's a scam. Bitcoin's dead." Did you never think it was a scam, that this is going to go and die on you?
Yes and no. I mean, like I said, I was young, right? And like I just kept reverting back to that. Like this is my first job. I've worked for 6 months, a year. This is something that, hey, you know what? It's if I mess up now, like I'm gonna make more money, down the
Hmm.
line. Like a grand scheme of things, like, $1,000 sure sounds like a lot, especially to a kid right out of college. But in the grand scheme of things, like you're making a lot of those $1,000 over your entirety of your career. So I just always had that long-term horizon with everything where I was like, okay, like, if they're telling me to invest for my future, I can afford to take a little bit more of a perceived risk right now. And so that's kind of just how I always looked at it was, if I'm 25, 26 years old and I lose everything, I lose 10, 15 grand. Okay, sure. That's not going to be great. Like maybe that puts me back from potentially losing a house, not losing a house, but not being able to buy a house as quickly as possible. But like, at the end of the day, if I'm right, this could be a huge home run and this could change my life. And, luckily, God bless my decision there because, I was able to just kind of dig my heels in there, and that decision really did change my life.
Mhm. One thing that I really like about your story is that you never gave up on Bitcoin. So you stayed with it from 2016. And I've interviewed a lot of people, and a lot of them did give up on Bitcoin here and there, especially when it came to the bear markets. Let's talk about 2019 now. So 2019 was just a recovery year. Not very much happens in a recovery year. It's pretty much a boring year. Um, the prices obviously do go up a little bit. Were you DCAing or were you lump sum buying?
Yeah, so I don't know how you would describe it, but I was more buying every 2 weeks, every time I got a paycheck. So I wasn't like,
Wow. Yeah.
DCAing. It wasn't as easy to DCA back then. There's of course a lot of great wallets now where you can DCA, but I was just buying, every 2 weeks, put in a bunch of money into the Robinhood at that time, and just buying Bitcoin and just kept doing that every 2 weeks. So no DCA, but kind of, I guess, in a sense, like every 2 weeks when the money was coming in. And then, I had a unique job as well. Like I had, it was a forensic engineering job. So you foreigners probably don't understand how this all works in the United States, but The United States is very sue happy, believe it or not. And Florida is one of those, the highest states for people suing each other in the United States. And so when, a forensic engineer, their job is basically to become an expert witness for a certain scenario. So, for example, for me right now, or for my degree and everything like that, it was for people slipping and falling. It was for people getting in car accidents and needing back surgery or something like that. And so when I was driving around, I would get checks for reimbursement for my car and other things like that. So I was getting some other, reimbursement checks, so to speak, for meals and other things like that. And I was utilizing that in order to, buy more Bitcoin as well. So although it was every 2 weeks for the most part, I was buying a little bit here or there every single day, but I wouldn't call it a strict DCA.
Mhm, mhm. We've slightly touched upon 2020. So the pandemic hit. There was a lot of uncertainty. We didn't know what was going on. Most of the world was in lockdown. People were losing their jobs. People were losing their lives. People were losing loved ones. Life was very much disruptive. And then, obviously, like you said, in March 2020, Bitcoin had one of its worst corrections in its history, where it went from, I think it was 9,200 and it dropped down to 3,800. And it was 63% drop. It did make a V-shaped recovery, and you were buying in that dip. So I have a huge amount of respect for you. And then obviously throughout the year, it did recover. Is there anything else in 2020 that you haven't already covered?
No, I mean that's basically the gist of it. Like, well, yeah, when it started to dip, that's when I really doubled down, and yeah, I'm really happy I ended up doing that. Hindsight's of course 2020. Uh, little pun in there, but I do think that yeah, it was that decision alone changed my entire life.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it must have done. That's absolutely amazing. And you had money then as well because you were working. That's brilliant. How long did the relationship with your girlfriend last?
Oh man, that one was 2.5 years, but
Oh,
that
okay.
was like kind of early on at that time. So that one, that was, yeah, it was. There were some red flag signs there early on that I probably should have paid attention to. But yeah, like I said, I was young, so I was still learning about everything, not just money, but also relationships. So I got a little bit of a better head on my shoulders now. So more in tune with some of those red flags, I guess, earlier on now.
Okay, awesome. Let's talk about 2021. So that was 2021 was a bull run year. So we started off the year around about 39,000 US dollars. And we just went almost vertically up to the first peak, which was in April 2021, when we hit the local peak of, I think it was 64,000 US dollars. The Pi cycle top was hit in April 2021 as well. We had the China FUD that came in. So China said it was going to ban mining, etc., for the 1,000 times. But what that actually did was it cut the price of Bitcoin. Bitcoin dropped 50%. And then it ranged at 30,000 for a good couple of months. Bitcoins were taken off the exchanges, and the supply shock then led Bitcoin to make its actual all-time high in November 2021 when it hit 69,000 US dollars. By then, the SEC came in. It started to issue Wells notices to cryptocurrency exchanges and projects. There was inflation concerns, economy concerns, and naturally, it was the end of the 4-year cycle, and we slid down into a bear market. Even when we look back at 2021, it was a very, very difficult year. What was it like for you?
Yeah, that is a good question. 21 was actually when I started Green Candle, my media company as well. So I was a lot more in tune with what everything was, what was going on, to be honest, at that point. So, I really was just kind of looking to Bitcoin more. And at every turn, I just kept getting, more and more bullish on the thesis of Bitcoin. Just because I had to teach it to people. I had to try to describe it succinctly, like really just talk and have a bunch of different conversations. And at that time too, I was, kind of being pretty broad with the content. So I was going through the overall macro phase. So not just, hey, Bitcoin only. I mean, I still look at a little bit of the macro indicators, but I saw that the United States just printed, 40 to 50% of the overall money supply within a year period. And so I'm telling my friends that are just, from high school, hey, we're going to see some massive inflation. They're like, no, we're fine. We're fine. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. Why aren't we seeing it right away? And I'm trying to tell them, hey, all with all these delays and everything else, the amount of policy or the amount of that we're going to see today, is going to be astronomical compared to what we're going to see down the line, because we're going to see massive amounts of inflation, all of these different things from policies that are implemented today. They still didn't get it. They still were just telling me, you're full of it. We had the bunch of different controversies, things like that. I was telling everybody as I was diving into this more, I'm screaming from the rooftops, look into this Bitcoin thing. It's the only thing that's fixed supply. I've been telling you guys for years. Nobody's listening to me. And that was when I kind of just started to back off the orange pilling, because yeah, I mean, I guess I was getting some
Mm.
people that were annoyed with me at that point in time. They were like, everything's all right. I could just throw a dart at the dartboard and pick 3 letters or 4 letters and get a stock ticker that will, shoot up. So it doesn't really matter. And so it was some wild times, to say the very least. And then, everything kind of came crashing down slowly after that in 21, where, like you were saying, we were at 30K. I was telling everybody still to buy at 30K. I was telling them to buy it when it got up to the 60, 70K. Before that, and just nobody was listening to me. And a lot of my friends, guys like to give each other hard times. That was like 21 was like probably the peak for me, where everybody was giving me a hard time about
Oh
Bitcoin then.
gosh.
And nobody would really listen to me. So I guess you know what? Maybe they're looking back and talking to each other now and saying, "Hey, you know what? Brandon was right on all this." At least I hope they are. I don't know, but it's definitely it's funny looking back on it and kind of talking through how the progression of all this stuff happens, especially the longer you get into this space.
Mhm, mhm. So in April 2021, when the China FUD hit, and all of a sudden you saw your Bitcoin portfolio almost cut in half, how did you feel? What was going through your head?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at that time I bought a real estate property. So I'm sitting in it right now, a duplex. I had the media going kind of full force. Still kind of figuring it out. And a lot more attention was coming around Bitcoin, even though it was negative. I had a feeling I was kind of on to something, right? Even though you see your portfolio kind of be cut in half, you also got to think, like, I was buying when, that dip
Mhm.
happened when it was like 4,000. So it being cut in half to like 30K, I'm like, I wasn't even really sweating it too much, to be honest. Like I said, at a certain point in time, you always try to kick you, like, if you're kicking yourself to try to sell at the top and buy at the bottom, you're going to lose a lot of sleep. That's just the name of the game. So you really have to understand what you're investing in. And that's what starting the media company, that's what, seeing these dips go through. That's all it kind of really came down to. Um, you know, at a certain point, people just quit believing you, and the number go up. Like I said, that'll maybe orange pill them, but it took a little bit of time for me to get there. And 21 was definitely a test of that. But I think I was just kind of realizing at a certain point, hey, you know what? Let's go to these different conferences. Let's get involved with all this. I believe my first conference was like the Bitcoin conference in 21 in Miami, or maybe it was 22. I can't remember correctly exactly, but I know it was like one of those 2 years in Miami, and there was like 30, 40,000 people there at that time as well. So I'm like, all right, if there's 30, 40,000 people here for a conference in Miami, there's something to this, right? There's not just 30, 40,000 people going to any conference in the world. This is something that, could be, something that's big in the future. And so, yeah, that's kind of the overall feeling. There was a lot of like, hey, you know what? I found this thing. Let me tell all my friends and family about it, and let's dive full in. And then, nobody wanted to listen to me still. And then, yeah, I guess here I am today where they're still not listening to me, but now they're getting a little bit more curious now that the price is running up again.
It's always the case. We'll talk about the YouTube channel and the conferences in a moment. Let's just touch upon November 2021. So obviously we had the double peak. Were you a moon boy in November 2021? Did you think that we'd enter this super cycle, blah, de, blah, de, blah, and it was going to the moon?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always super bullish. So I thought that, the super cycle narrative, plan B, the stock to flow model, all of that, I was very much in tune with that. I honestly thought at that point in time, we were going to hit 100,000 back then. And I think that was big and because of what we, kind of saw there, the double peaks. But what I think too is like I honestly think that we probably should have hit that 100,000 mark back then. But we talk about a little bit about price suppression or paper Bitcoin here now. And maybe we'll dive into that in a minute. But I mean, the true paper Bitcoin attack was FTX, Celsius, BlockFi, all of these companies, during that time. So when they're blowing up around this time, yeah, if the buying was true, who knows? We could have actually had Bitcoin, skyrocket up to 100K. So I think that, the narrative around that time when we were seeing all of this, right? Call me a moon boy all you want, but I mean, like I said, it's simple supply and demand. We're seeing it now, similar to what we were seeing back then. Is that, if the buying pressure is so much that what it is right now, well, I mean, back then it was still extremely high. We had NFL players announcing that they're, National Football League players announcing that they're taking their salaries in Bitcoin. All these giant athletes doing it. There was a lot of publicity around Bitcoin during that time, to say the very least. And so I was kind of more under the impression, hey, you know what? People are going to FTX or these other places to buy, but turns out they were just very nefarious characters and not actually, going through with those buys, unfortunately.
We'll talk about the bear market after we've touched upon Green Candle. So why did you open Green Candle? And what was your first experience? Was it your first YouTube channel that you've actually opened?
Yeah, 100%. It was the first channel. So I had a bunch of track teammates when I was in graduate school. I was texting all of them. We had this big giant group message. I'm like, boys, we got to be looking at all of this. We got to be looking into Bitcoin. One of my buddies was like, hey, what about Bitcoin? What about Ethereum? What about all these different coins? And so I started sending him articles, podcasts. He's like, dude, why don't we kind of have a podcast, or at least start writing and all this kind of stuff about, what we're learning and what we're talking about, because I think that I'm not the only one that's really interested in all this. And I was kind of tentative to start the YouTube channel, to be honest with you. So we just started a blog, like a Substack at first. So I was like, all right, you know what? Maybe writing is the easier way. And I'm a little afraid to put my face behind a camera. So we started doing that. And then, started a Twitter account, and my buddy who I started this with ended up, getting a job in the Bitcoin space, and they said no more content. So I was kind of like, all right, well, I still like this stuff. I still want to do it. He's like, you know what, why don't you, do the podcast? I think you would be really good behind the camera. You're always good at talking to me about these things. Why don't you just kind of put your face out there? And thank God he did, and told me to do all that. And yeah, here I am today. So it was a little bit of a push from my friend, but also, just kind of learning out loud and always wanting the entrepreneurial type of mindset and spirit behind just how I wanted my life to live. And at that time too, Barstool Sports. I don't know if you guys are familiar there. Maybe over, it sounds like your accents, you're from the UK or something, but I don't know if you guys are super familiar with Barstool Sports over there, but that was blowing up. And that's kind of my generation. And I absolutely loved Barstool. So I was consuming their content as well as Bitcoin content. And I was like, you know what? Like, I think I could bring a little bit of that, humor, that flavor towards Bitcoin. And so I was like, I'll create Green Candle and I'll make it the Barstool of Bitcoin and finance. And, hopefully people think I'm still doing a good job of that, but that's always been kind of the dream behind it.
And what made you pick the title, the Green Candle? What made you pick the name?
Yeah, so obviously we got the candlestick charts, right? So green means it's going up. I didn't want to have Bitcoin in the name because, the original idea was, Barstool of finance, right?
Oh,
And
okay.
Bitcoin is part of that. I've kind of just developed into a Bitcoin Maxi, and that is the only way I see now, right? Like, I mean, I've got a couple real estate properties just for maybe tax benefits, a little bit of cash flow for the entrepreneurial kind of base, so to speak. But, for the most part, it's just all Bitcoin at this point. And so I do think that there's potential for all these other guys to get in. And I think, it kind of allowed me to get into, more of the hedge fund space and, interview some guys that are managing billions of dollars when I was first kind of getting started. So I think that this is a path, and I think a big part of it is because of the name I originally picked.
That really works out. And tell me about them, because you've had some amazing guests on the channel, absolutely amazing guests like Adam Black, which is crazy. So for those people who don't know, he is the VIP of the VIP of the VIP for Bitcoin Maxis. But you've had amazing guests, amazing interviews. Tell me, how do you plan an interview? And then the other thing is, how do you network?
Yeah, that's a great question. So planning an interview, I think is a little different than just kind of the networking aspect. So I always have guests that I want. Luckily I've gotten been very blessed and have had a lot of luck and some success networking with some of them. But I usually just have like a couple questions I want to ask, but not really a whole lot planned out, to be honest. I just think I'm very curious and kind of want to have a more genuine conversation with people there. So maybe I have 3 or 4 different topics that I want to talk about, but for the most part, I listen to some of their other interviews, or maybe if they haven't been interviewed before, just kind of based on their background or other things like that, what would be interesting to kind of learn from them based on, their experiences, talking, all that kind of stuff. And then I try to like loosen them up a little bit towards the end and, want to know a little bit more about them personally. Because I think in the Bitcoin space, you hear a lot of these people go on different podcasts, and, for the most part, they're kind of talking their book. It's very similar conversation. And, I think that there's also, humans and, people have lives outside of Bitcoin. So I like to just be kind of curious about all these different aspects of their life, which kind of maybe makes some people relate to them, whether it's, through sports or through their upbringing, through, their degrees, maybe they moved around a bunch as a kid, all of these different factors. So yeah, anyway, long-winded way of saying that's kind of the way I prepare, is just, try to really be an active listener, and be curious. And, I kind of learned that from Joe Rogan, because it seems like he has like a couple questions prepared, but you never know what somebody else is going to say. And, I don't want to have a list of questions list out and then basically not have the ability to follow up and kind of dig deeper into a point that somebody said just because, just because I have 10 questions and I sent them all these 10 questions before and I said, hey, you know what? This is what I'm going to ask you. This is what I'm going to stick to it. And then they rehearse their answers or anything like that. I want people to feel like, hey, you know what? I'm sitting at a dinner table, coffee table, sitting on the couch, just chatting. all this kind of stuff, having more of a relaxed conversation, and, also really starting to learn something from these people. So that's kind of how I prepare and, go about that. The networking aspect, man, that's been a grind to say the very least. So, I've started, like I said, Green Candle. I believe technically I started February 21. First conference I sponsored was Bitcoin and Blockchain conference here in Florida, in Tampa, which was, I believe, November 21. So went in there, just kind of networked with some people. And then we went to Miami. I was just, I think I got media passes there the first year after that, and maybe it was 22 at that point. And I just kind of decided, hey, you know what? I if I want to take this as a business, I need to invest in myself and invest in this. And that was what I was really trying to do, right? Hey, I will, try to get a media pass for however many followers I've got. Luckily, it was a little bit smaller at that time, so I was able to get media passes for a lot less followers than you can probably do today. But I did that, and then I also, all these other conferences, I said, hey, you know what? Like, I will MC. I have a podcast, but I will MC. I'll do, I'll work literally all day long, where, I'll get there at 8, 9 o'clock, and then I'll be backstage, networking with the speakers who are coming up to the stage. So that was kind of my little hack there, where it's like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm not a main stage MC or anything like that, but I can get into the ear of a lot of these guys who are on the secondary or third stage. And so people start to recognize you. You get to talk with them a little bit behind the stage. Hey, you know what? I have a podcast. Would love to have you on. Can I get a way to contact you that maybe isn't just a traditional Twitter DMs, whether it's like email, Telegram, Signal, whatever it is. And then, you know what, when you're an MC, you also get some other passes, maybe like at the Bitcoin conference, like a whale pass or something like that, right? So you can get backstage with all the speakers, or, to the back exclusive areas. And so then when you're in there, hey, go up, have a conversation with all these people, share a beer, share a coffee, share lunch, do all these different kind of things and talk to all the people. And, you also have to realize a lot of these big guys, they get asked to go on a million different podcasts. So any way that you can kind of add value to them personally is a way to kind of get in with them. And then, it's not like they owe you something, but maybe, down the line that'll all come back. Right. When you have somebody on your podcast, or, you're able to help them do something, it kind of all just comes back full circle in some way, shape, or form. So I've always been a proponent of being in this space, just trying to see what you can give out of a relationship, not what you can get. And so always be cognizant of that, right? Just really just understand this is a long-term game. It's a long-term relationship game. If you've, there's no point in, trying to get, a salacious question in there or something like that, just to, maybe get some clickbaity thing in order to burn a relationship. It's more so like, hey, you know what? Like, why don't you get these guys? You can hear their perspective. Maybe you don't have to agree with everything that they do or say or things like that, but, you're trying to build on this relationship and, really try to, be genuine with everything. And I think that's the big key in what I try to do. And building these relationships over time has allowed me to ask people to come on the podcast, probably when I was a little bit smaller of a show than they've been on before. And, it's allowed my show to kind of blow up a little bit more than maybe the next guys. And so, it's all about building that personal brand first. And, the more you can do that, the more access you could have to some of these great guests.
Awesome. No, you've done very, very well. So let's talk about we'll talk about your community in a little while, because I think they're absolutely amazing. I have to mention them, and I know you'd love talking about them. So that was we spoke about 2021. You've started your YouTube channel now. 2022 was a bear market, so it would have been your second bear market. Projects can go to zero almost overnight for what seems like no reason, and then you find out afterwards that there was dodgy things happening in the background. We had Celsius, 3 Hours Capital, Voyager, FTX, Luna, amongst other black swan events in 2022. 2023 was a recovery year. 2024, last year, was the halving year. Before we talk about 2024, 2023 and 2022, the bear market, and 2023, the recovery year. What was your experience in these 2 years? Because not only did you have the podcast or the YouTube channel, but you had your own journey as well.
Yeah, so at that time I was still working a job, a full-time job. This was all kind of like I was using all of my PTO to go to all these different conferences and still kind of networking. Um, and 2022, 2023 time. Oh yeah, so 2022 time. You could actually probably go back and look at the channel. I was getting like no views at that time. I kind of started to realize like what is going on. I'm networking. I'm getting some of these great guests. What's going on? Like, why aren't I getting any of these views? While I see a lot of my peers doing pretty well and getting some of these views for some of these big channels or some of these guys. I started working with somebody to kind of help with the YouTube, like title, thumbnail, all of these different things. And that's when everything changed for me, because I realized, okay, not only in a bear market, are people, just not super into, or not only in a bear market are people still trying to learn about Bitcoin, but this content like still kind of resonates even in a bear market. And so that's when I really started to double and triple down on my business and started investing more into the YouTube channel and just kind of trying to figure it out from there. And then that's kind of the path forward. So that I think at that time I maybe had like 900 subs. I wasn't monetized or anything like that. And I started kind of doubling, tripling down on there. So really started to see the bear market as a time to build and kind of really learn more and educate more, especially as we had these blow ups go on. And let's be honest here, right? When there's positive news, things going up, or when there's things going down, people want to talk about Bitcoin and what's happening. When the price is relatively flat, that's when people don't really want to talk about what's going on, right? Because there's nothing boring or interesting to kind of dive into. So that time I was just kind of like, yeah, still obsessed and checking the price literally every single day. I probably lost a lot of sleep just from checking the price so much. But I think at that time I remember every single day, first thing I did when I woke up, check the Bitcoin price. Now I don't check it nearly like maybe like once or twice a week or something like that. And of course I see it on the Twitter feed, but um, you know, at that time, I was definitely, looking at it a little bit more and kind of stressing over the little moves a little bit more than I do today, to say the very least.
Now. So 2024, a lot of legitimacy was added to the Bitcoin space or the cryptocurrency space. We had the ETFs for Bitcoin and Ethereum at the beginning of the year. We had an alt season in quarter 1. We had Trump running on Bitcoin, or that was one of the things that he ran on Bitcoin. We had our first Bitcoin president. We had another alt season, a tiny alt season in quarter 4. In the summer of 2024, last year, we had Germany sell 50,000 Bitcoin. Thankfully, it didn't tank the market, but that was just one thing that was quite bizarre. We also had a very extended meme season. Nevertheless, it was a good year for Bitcoin, not the best year for altcoins. What was your experience of 2024? Because now it seems like you were talking to all your friends, you were talking to all your family, you were talking to all these people, telling them Bitcoin, 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 it's the next thing. And now we have legitimacy added to the crypto space.
Yeah. So, I mean, at that time, I was very much into, just Bitcoin and Bitcoin only and seeing the development, right? I mean, seeing a lot of, the altcoins kind of pop up. it was hard to not, really go diving into a lot of these altcoins, to be honest with you. But I mean, I just kept reverting back and listening to all of these, to a lot of my peers. And, at that time, I was really just kind of trying to stay focused on just, green candle and green candle only, and as well as, Bitcoin and Bitcoin only, right? When it came to it, to the different investments. And so, I've always looked at it as, hey, keep it simple, stupid, right? The classic KISS acronym. Like, why would I try to complicate it or stress myself out over trading? I'm already looking at the Bitcoin price like crazy. Like, I couldn't imagine looking at Dogecoin or some of these other things. As constantly I was looking at the Bitcoin price. So I think for my own sanity, I was just like, hey, you know what? Let's just lock in. Let's just get with Bitcoin only. Maybe I could miss out on some of these altcoins, but from my experience, I actually worked at one of the exchanges that blew up. Maybe we could talk about that. But I kind of saw the inner workings of what goes on with a lot of these different altcoins and things like that. And so because I saw the inner workings of a lot of it, I decided, hey, you know what? It's probably best to just stay out of any altcoin and just kind of just stay focused on the Bitcoin mission.
So let's talk about 2025 now. We've had obviously the inauguration of President Trump. A lot of legitimacy has been brought into the crypto space again with the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. There are many other countries who are looking to implement Bitcoin mining or buying Bitcoin strategic reserves. It's a very, very bullish year, exceptionally bullish. We have made new all-time highs, and it is gearing up to be an epic bull run at some point this year. What are your thoughts on 2021? 2025.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that Bitcoin is just we're starting to really see the financialization of Bitcoin in this cycle. So, like you said, we had Trump and coming into office, but I think the two things that really get overlooked are the SAB 121 and the FASB. So SAB 121 is allowing banks to now custody Bitcoin. Now,
Mhm.
I'm not proponing, and I'm not a proponent of you essentially holding Bitcoin in a bank, but your mom, your dad, and, grandparents, whatever, they might feel a little bit more comfortable to have their, banks custody their Bitcoin, at least at this time, right? I think that everybody should learn and lean towards self custody and go through that respect. But I think that this unlocks new people into Bitcoin that we didn't really see before. Of course, we had the ETFs launch last year. So they're already a year, into maturity, at least in the United States. And we're seeing the amount of inflows just be astronomical. And I don't even think retail is really all in just yet. And then we have the FASB. You've seen the amount of Bitcoin treasury companies come online at an
Mhm.
astronomical rate. If you go to Bitcoin Treasuries, I think it's bitcointreasuries.net or .com. Can't
.net.
remember. Yeah, it's .net. So if you go to bitcointreasuries.net, they'll show you literally how many are coming on to a Bitcoin standard in the past 30 days. It's usually like in the 20s to 30s. So literally a new publicly traded company is coming on literally every single day. And I
Mhm.
think that number is going to start to increase. And I think the thing that nobody's talking about is there's about 250,000 Bitcoin left on OTC desk, which means 50K or more buys in general. So the big players, the big dogs trying to buy a lot of money. There's like 2.15 million Bitcoin left on exchanges. Michael
Yeah.
Saylor's buying up like weeks worth of supply, in a single day when he announces this buys. And that's just one publicly traded company. Now we have, Adam Back's company announcing today that they want to buy 50,000 Bitcoin. And we have all of these other companies starting to announce that they want to, raise more of this fiat in order to buy more Bitcoin. Everybody's talking about, hey, Bitcoin's going to have diminishing returns. I think not so fast, my friends. I think this is setting up for a crazy cycle and maybe even a supply shock as we're going to have
Mhm.
all of these countries come online on top of already having all of these Bitcoin treasury companies. And retail's not even here yet. So how often are we going to have the whales start to sell? Are they going to really be holding on? I think the narrative of diminishing returns is crap. I think you can't model a new system in Bitcoin in an old system like we have in all of these other financial tools. And we've never seen anything as scarce as Bitcoin in human history. So we're going to start to see that really start to play out here. And I think we're going to see a run like we've never seen before.
So it's super, super exciting for you and the channel as well. Oh my gosh, I actually love your channel. I do watch your channel. And I'll put all the links down to your channel. Just before we go, I want to talk about your community, because you have an absolutely amazing community. They're very supportive and they're very, very nice. And it's quite, sometimes it can be quite difficult in the crypto space to come across communities like this. Tell me about your community.
Yeah, they're absolutely great. I mean, I've always got people in the chat during the live streams.
Hmm.
I've got a lot of great fans that come and watch and go through every single video. And honestly, like it's almost surreal that I have videos where I'm setting up a live stream and I have people waiting 20, 30 minutes in there, just waiting on me to get started and kind of get going and popping up in the chat. So very blessed for all of this. If you were to tell me that this was a case like 3-4 years ago, I would have told you you're absolutely crazy. Like, what are you even talking about? So the community, all the people that have been supporting me through all these years. I know we've had, I've gotten people in the chat that have been there since I had 100 subscribers, and now I got 13,500. So hopefully that keeps growing and the community keeps staying strong, and very blessed and thankful that a lot of people continue to support and watch my videos, and I hope that I can keep entertaining people and keep bringing some good educational content to them, as well as hopefully bringing some guests to them and bringing a new perspective, and always trying to hopefully help people find some value in what I'm saying and what some of the other guests are bringing to the table as well. So very blessed and absolutely can't say enough about the community and what people coming into the chat, commenting on all this stuff. Like it means more than anybody would really know, and it keeps me kicking and keeps me up late thinking about how can I make another great video that these guys are really looking forward to. So I absolutely love it. I have the best job, so to speak,
Yeah.
in the world right now, doing all this. And I truly wake up looking forward to every single day. And a big part of that is just from the community aspect, and very blessed for all of that. So yeah, thank you for asking that question. I've actually never been asked that on a podcast before. So the community is great, and if I could give them a shout out on every single episode, every single thing, like I try to do my best and get everybody wrangled in, and say thank you to all of them. But it's always, I always feel like I'm not saying it enough.
Yeah, no, I've noticed your community. They are absolutely lovely. And anyone who obviously wants to join your channel and join your community, all the details will be down in the description. And I do highly recommend them. They're very, very friendly, very, very kind, and they're nice to newcomers as well. Even though they're very educated because they've been following you. So just quickly, my last question would be: you've accomplished so much in such a little amount of time with your channel. What's next for you? What's next for Green Candle?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Green Candle still going to be humming along. I want to put out more content, more videos. I'm working on some more, I guess, like talking head type of videos, so you guys can get to know me a little bit more, as well as still keeping the podcast and doing the live streams and everything else. I'm also starting to branch out and do a little bit different type of content. I was in Spain and I did running with the bulls. That's part of the reason why I've got the mustache here. So those of you guys who have been following me for a little bit know I normally have a beard, but I went mustache. I got the matador haircut here and everything like that. So I started a new channel. It's I think you could just search my name, but it's more of a vlog channel for like all of my traveling and all of the conferences I'm going to. So you guys can maybe take a peek into, how I've built all these relationships and everything like that we've been describing throughout this, throughout my entire journey, and maybe entertain you a little bit and show you guys a little bit of a new side of what, just really DCAing into Bitcoin and, kind of tracing your dreams can really look like. So hopefully, that will bring you guys some new entertainment and show you guys a little different side of me, as well as, keeping you guys educated on the Green Candle channel as well. So a few different things that I'm working on, and I've got a vlog running with the bulls coming soon. So be on the lookout for that.
Definitely. Well, Brandon, it was absolutely amazing having you on the channel, learning about your cryptocurrency, your Bitcoin story. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.